Okay. We're at 12:32, so we should start. Just a note that we are recording. The recording has started, correct?
Yeah, the recording has already started.
Okay, very good. So my name is Kristen Rodier. I am a professor of philosophy in the Center for Humanities. My pronouns are she, her. Welcome to Who Me Cheat, Part 2. I just want to start off by talking about where I'm located. So I am in what is colonially known as St. Albert, Alberta. Maybe some other people are there as well, which is on Treaty 6 and the traditional homeland of the Métis in Alberta. Athabasca campus is on the traditional homeland of the Dene, Woodland Cree, Nakota Sioux, Blackfoot, Sioux, Tina, and Métis Region 4. And the displacement and disempowerment of these peoples by a colonial government makes a lot of our work possible. So we understand through virtual work that there are people from many different places attending today. So if you would like to add something about where you are, if that fits for you, into the chat, that can be an option. Tomorrow is National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Rather than just being a day off, it is a day where we are prompted to engage with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action, to remember children who were taken, and to advocate for action. If you are attending a local event tomorrow and you want to spread the word, please feel free to post that information in the chat also. So we can take a minute for that if you want. In this session, we will be using a response system, a website where you can have input on the scenarios, and that site is called Mentimeter. And just so everyone knows, your responses in that system are confidential and anonymous, and as soon as we're done the presentation, that information gets deleted. So it does not capture your information or anything, which is important to note since we're talking about academic integrity. So hopefully everyone feels comfortable to answer however you want. And so then I will pass the baton to my colleague, Elaine Fabro.
Thanks very much, Kristen. My name is Elaine Fabro. I'm the University Librarian at AU, and I have oversight for the library, the Copyright Office, and the University Archives. I'm speaking to you from the town of Athabasca, which is the traditional territory of the Cree and the Métis peoples, and in Treaty 6. And I'll turn it over to Sarah-Jean.
Thanks, Elaine. I'm Sarah-Jean Watt, and I'm speaking to you from Amiskwaci Waskahikan, Beaver Hills House, or Edmonton, on Treaty 6 territory. This is the traditional territory of the Plains Cree, Woodland Cree, Beaver Cree, Ojibwe, and the Métis people. I'm the Right Site Coordinator here at Athabasca. The Right Site is AU's online writing center, and you'll probably learn a bit more about the support that you can get as we discuss our scenarios today. And I'll also just note that if you would like, you can turn on live captions so you can read along. Just click More. It's the 3 dots icon, and then scroll down and click on Turn on Live Captions. And finally, please just raise your hand if you'd like to speak, and we'll call on you and turn on your microphone. Raising your hand is found under Reactions at the top, which is just left of More. And of course, we encourage you to use the chat.
Okay, so our workshop today is scenario-based. So we're just going to kick off with our first scenario. I'll hand it to you, Elaine.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the first scenario is called the do-over. Joe hasn't been in school in over 2 decades. He's working on his first English essay, which is a critical analysis of a short essay included in the English textbook. The textbook also includes commentary on the essay, demonstrating ways of approaching critical analyses. In his paper, he has cited the essay that he is analyzing, but has also drawn on some of the additional commentary in the text. He doesn't make a distinction in his citations between the text and the commentary, and represents the work he drew on from the commentary as his own ideas. Since all of his reference material is from the course text, he feels like it should be clear to his professor that he isn't plagiarizing. His professor returns the paper with a note from the Academic Integrity Office that says that he gets 0 on the assignment since he represented the text commentary as his own. He feels like since he didn't bring in sources from outside the course text, that it is obviously unintentional and that he should be given a do-over. Should he get a do-over?
Oh, you're muted, Kristen.
I was muted. For those of you who were following along but would also like to just read it too, I've just pasted the scenario in the chat, and we are going to ask you to rank your responses to the question, should Joe get a do-over? So the way that this works is you will go to menti.com, which is at the top here, and enter this code. And the instructions are there. I can also get a link, I think. Yeah. So either one of those ways, and we really want to hear from you. So I've got 3 options here. The first is, okay, to the question, should Joe get a do-over? Yes, because he didn't know to cite the commentary differently. No, because it is misconduct, even if it's unintentional. Or it depends. I would need to see the instructions on the assignment to understand if they were clear. So rank them in order of your agreement, I guess. Can everyone see the responses coming in? Yeah. We've got 5 responses. This is sort of an interesting question because should Joe get a do-over? You can answer it from different places. Yes, from the heart, he deserves it, or yes, from the policy perspective. We have a quick hand up. Should we take that quick hand before we go to? Okay.
Sure. I don't see the hand up though. Oh, yeah, I do.
Rajinder, do you mean to have your hand up? Did you want to say something?
I will turn on your microphone, Rajinder. You should be able to unmute yourself and talk now, Rajinder.
Well, I am going to stop sharing and just go back to us. And it looks like people really wanted to rank number 1. It depends. And number 2, yes, he does deserve a do-over because he didn't know how to cite the commentary differently. And then in last place, no. So we're going to go through, unless we are hearing, okay, the hand is down. There, Carla, that's a great way to interact too. You can put it in the chat if you like. So first, we will hear from Sarah Jean on the question of the do-over.
Thanks, Kristen. Well, I noticed that Joe had a sneaking suspicion that something was wrong with his actions when he thought about the situation, but decided that it should be clear to his professor he wasn't plagiarizing. So that could be a warning sign to the student that maybe something is wrong, and talking to their instructor or writing coach would be a good idea. Now, there is, of course, a genuine fear of unintentional plagiarism, which could feel similar. In that case, I would also recommend getting guidance from your instructor or a writing coach to help clarify what's expected and help you achieve that good academic integrity. But there's some other actions that would help Joe avoid this sort of thing in the future. The first step during the writing process is actually understanding the assignment instructions. And at that point, Joe should be spending some time getting to know what it means to write a critical analysis. There are different expectations for different types of writing. So for example, if he had been asked to write a summary of the essay, there would definitely be no reason to include other sources of information like the commentary. If he had been asked to write about what it means to write a critical analysis, he may have been able to paraphrase or quote ideas from the commentary with proper citation, of course. But for a critical analysis, the point would have been to demonstrate his own analysis and understanding of the essay. Borrowing thoughts from others could potentially be acceptable with proper citation, but the purpose of the writing assignment could instead be to help students develop their critical thinking and other skills rather than borrow those other points from other authors to support their ideas. So overall, at this point in the writing process of understanding assignment instructions, it's really critical to check with your instructor if you don't understand what's being asked of you by the instructions. So let's say, though, that Joe did go ahead and cite the commentary in addition to the essay, even though that's not the idea of the assignment. What would proper citation look like? Well, something Joe may not be aware of is that with a textbook or anthology that contains texts written by various authors, each text must be separately cited. So approaching it logically, that does make sense because each text has its own author. Any text that doesn't have a listed author will probably be attributable to the editors. And Joe would therefore need to cite the author of the essay when discussing the essay and the editors of the textbook when paraphrasing their commentary on the essay. And his works cited page would then have two separate entries, one for each text within the textbook. Again, I don't think that's what the instructor is going for here, but there would be a proper way to cite that. Overall, I would advocate for Joe to get a do-over. It's that heart thing that you mentioned, Kristen. But, you know, he could do a critical analysis, I think, on a different essay than this one.
Thanks very much, Sarah Jean. The other thing that I thought about as I was working through the scenario is that there's also the possibility that while he knew he needed to cite the original essay, he isn't clear or wasn't clear on how and when to cite additional materials or even which citation style to use. My advice to Joe would be to, as Sarah Jean has said, reach out to the instructor for additional information on their expectations surrounding citations. Joe could have also searched the library for information about citation styles and how to cite sources for this kind of an assignment, or could have also had a discussion with a librarian to help him locate library resources that are appropriate for the topic. I agree with Sarah Jean that probably for the same reasons that you probably should get a do-over, maybe to think about this as a learning opportunity. So, Kristen.
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of different ways to respond, I think, to this scenario. And the important thing to really have on our radar here is that according to the policy, this is misconduct. So it really highlights the ways in which it's not just enough to cite, but you have to sort of know what you're citing. And in this case, it's really important to understand the source that you're using. Is it a single author book? Is it a collection of essays? And if it's a collection, what part inside? So, I don't want to sort of scare everyone and say plagiarism is a zero-sum situation, but it really, in this case, represent the source of the ideas has been misrepresented. But I want to sort of zoom out from the scenario a little bit and sort of think about Joe as a person. And, just starting back to university, I don't know how many of you caught that from the very beginning of the scenario, just starting back after a long gap. There's a lot of, they're not intentional, but there can be tripwires along the way, getting to know sort of a university culture or climate. And so really, yeah, there you go. Some people are saying that did stick with them. I guess that's our student population, right? And really sort of talk to your instructor ahead of time. Get that preventative medicine and just say, these expectations, I think I understand what they are, but I'm not sure. And really, start a dialogue, say, I'm new, what should I look out for? Because actually, for me, as someone with 15 years teaching experience, this is a common occurrence where students are citing from a source that they're having trouble identifying what kind of source it is. So something you can do is approach your instructor and ask, will you look at a quick draft? Will you see if there's any major red flags? Because this really could have been caught easily and early in the process of coming to do your assignment. Someone at the right site could help, but also, your instructor is that resource. Okay, so people are asking in the chat about how to access the right site, which is great. If there's any last thoughts on Joe's scenario, we will move on. If there aren't, we'll move on.
I'll just jump in, Kristen, if you don't mind, and say that, yeah, definitely rely on your instructor, because when it comes to identifying plagiarism, a right site coach cannot necessarily do that for you. We can help you understand, perhaps, if you're lacking citations. We may have caught that with this person, but your instructor is really the best there, because they know the materials really well. They've read them. They know the content really well. So they're more likely to be able to tell you if you're kind of on that track. A lot of times the writing coach comes in after the fact if your instructor has identified a problem and then referred you to us to get support about how to avoid that in the future.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay, let's go to our second scenario. Take it away.
Okay, well, this is one source to rule them all. I love that title, Kristen. Sal just finished high school and is taking summer session at Athabasca to get a jump on the fall term. They're taking an introductory history course where they're supposed to write a paper on the historical impact of the development of new logging methods that affected lumber trade across the Atlantic during colonization of Canada. Their textbook contains many important facts from the time period, which make it seem clear that the three main impacts are from this time period. Since the professor is the authority who assigned the text, anything Sal might come up with outside of the three main factors represented in the text wouldn't be as important. So Sal decides to stick to citing what is in the text, putting it in their own words. However, they receive a very low mark on the paper and a caution that they're bordering on plagiarism with their paper. So what should Sal have done differently?
Okay. I'm going to go into present mode. I am just going to, so this question asks you to actually respond. So you're going to, you can write, I'm not sure how many, maybe like a Twitter amount into a caption, and just sort of what should Sal have done differently? Assigned a history paper, supposed to analyze, what was the impact of something in Canada during a particular period of time. They take the three main impacts right from the textbook, write their own paper and cite it, but have just stuck to that one source. So what could they have done differently? So the Menti code is in the chat and the link is in the chat. And people will start making suggestions for Sal. Research. Yeah, sure. Give yourself a cert. Okay. Not just stuck to the text. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Consulted more sources, reread the assignment directions. I'm a little worried about read other students' questions and instructors' response. As long as that's not looking at someone else's graded materials, because that would be misconduct. So we're not sharing graded materials. I really like the one that just came in because it said that Sal should come up with their own opinion on the topic, right? That one's coming in now. Yeah. Good. It's covering a lot of the ground that we will, I think. We come up with these scenarios, or at least I do, because it's something that is common. So, it's one of those situations of you can see what other people are doing wrong, but sometimes it's hard when you're working from instructions on what to do right. Reread the meaning in the Q&A on assignments. More resources. Right. Take out some books, old school. Great. Okay, well, we've got a good survey of responses. Maybe we will just start ebooks. Yeah, we have to have the Athabasca response to that. Oh, I like the next one. Ask the prof why it was bordering on plagiarism. So getting a really specific answer about that would be helpful. Great. Okay, well, people can keep adding stuff, but I'm going to just pass the baton to Elaine.
Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, these are really great, great points that people have raised. The first thing that struck me as I was thinking about the scenario is that Sal made a lot of assumptions about the textbook itself. They have assumed that the text is a comprehensive resource and that there isn't a need to go out and investigate what others have said on the topic or to even be critical about the perspective presented in the text. Sal, as others have said, Sal should have done some research to find out or to find some other sources on the topic. And if they weren't sure how to do that research, again, they could have contacted the library for assistance. This is something that library staff can assist with and do on a regular basis. The other thing that I noticed as notice about this is that while the scenario references Sal putting things into their own words, there's no reference to them taking notes about what they're reading. Taking notes is an important part in helping to synthesize the information that you're reading and can help to identify where the gaps are in the information. So when you're planning to take notes, an important first step is to figure out how you're going to differentiate between direct quotes, paraphrases of the text, and your own thoughts about the text. This helps to ensure that accidental plagiarism doesn't occur. For example, when you're quoting directly from the text, write down the quote, write down the source that the quote came from, and also the page number. A paraphrase section also needs to be cited. So make a note of the source of the paraphrase as in your notes. And then when you're taking your own notes, you have to delineate those from a paraphrase and a direct quote. So the strategy that I use when I'm doing this is I actually start the section of my own thoughts with the word me in capital letters. And then I'll, type out or write out my thoughts. I draw a big box around those comments, or I'll put my comments, if I'm doing it in a Word document, create the box and then put my comments in there. Then there's no chance of me accidentally assigning my comments as being a quote or vice versa. The other thing that Sal could have done in this scenario would be to ask the instructor what the research expectations are for the assignment. That can help to clarify what's necessary and then also allow Sal to focus their time more appropriately. Sarah Jean.
Yeah, good points from all and also from you, Elaine. Viviana said it's almost expected that Sal would use just the one textbook because he just finished high school, and high school is very much like that. So yeah, exactly. That's what we were going for, is the difficulty of taking that step. So, especially while learning the expectations of post-secondary, it's important to get the extra support from a writing coach. We can help you ahead of time as well, but also clarifying the instructor's expectations because they are the one that will be marking your assignment. But really the first thing that I noticed is the self-doubt that Sal was experiencing about adding their own thoughts to the paper. And some of you picked up on that as well, that Sal needs to bring in their opinion. So it seems that Sal felt their thoughts wouldn't be as important as the ideas presented in the textbook. Sal's viewing the textbook as the sole authority on the topic based on the instructor's authority as an expert who chose the textbook. And this self-doubt is a really common feeling in writing, where it might seem that others have said things so much better or that you have nothing to add. But I'll just point out that the word authority has also the word author in it. They come from the same root. And as you learn from your course materials, you're gaining some authority to speak on the topic knowledgeably, and you do that as the author or writer of your paper. It might help to understand that most, though not all, types of writing include adding your own thoughts. There can be a back and forth in a well-formed paper between others' thoughts and your own, with you participating in the conversation with the authors who previously wrote the source information. And that back and forth could be thought of as evidence followed by analysis. When you present evidence in a paper, you're citing information from other sources that support a main idea, your thesis statement. And when the information comes from reliable, well-established authorities, it provides the foundation for your idea. But then you must also analyze or explain the evidence. It's your job to explain how or why the evidence you've included supports your main idea. So the next time you write a paper, try to be conscious of the difference between evidence and analysis. Evidence must be cited, but analysis shouldn't be. Analysis is me, as Elaine put it. It's your own voice talking about the evidence. Know that there is value in your own voice as a student and a writer. And in most cases, your instructor will actually be looking for proof of your developing authority through your voice and analysis, which can show that you understand the course material and can engage in a competent discussion about it. So I would say Sal definitely should have included more analysis, as well as perhaps evidence from additional sources, that research that you've identified. A paper relying on a single source might risk being just a summary of the source. And even with the source being properly cited, Sal has not achieved the purpose of the paper, which is likely more to synthesize evidence from multiple sources into a main idea that can then be supported by those sources of evidence. If you're lacking confidence in that area with an assignment, it's something that a writing coach from the Right Site can support you with. And it would be best to have that discussion at the planning phase of the writing process.
Yeah, just something I was thinking about as I was listening to your responses was about Sal's misconception around audience. So who is the paper for? And often students can get snagged on the idea that how can I add anything? My professor knows this area. The person who wrote the textbook knows this area. And so I'm writing my paper to them and they know more. But that's generally speaking, in every case I can think of, not the audience for your paper in a course. So we don't write a paper to the professor, even though we do, but we don't think of them as our imagined audience. We think of someone who's not knowledgeable in the area, and our job is to explain, argue, persuade, marshal evidence, and so on, and to try to inform. So you can ask your instructor, who's the audience of this paper? And they might say to you, someone who's knowledgeable but not in this area. So it's your job to inform. So that can help. Who are we imagining? Who are we writing our paper to? Anyway, Sarah Jean kind of covered this, but something else that's really important that's going to thread through all of these scenarios is to really connect with the spirit of the assignment. So what is the goal of the assignment from the perspective of the instructor, but also like from the learning objective? So what am I needing to demonstrate here? Am I needing to demonstrate that I can paraphrase and summarize from the textbook? Well, what would the point of that be? So the instructor is probably looking for skills such as critical thinking, research skills, persuasive writing, and so on. And you just don't demonstrate those skills through copying. Copying demonstrates copying. I hate to be circular here. And here, the bordering on plagiarism comment from the instructor really has to do with the idea of handing in an assignment that doesn't fit the purpose or doesn't fit the spirit of the assignment. You've just sort of done none of the work, right? Just there's none of that me in it, but there's a paper. So what do we do with that? And people in the chat have pointed out the transition from high school. And so again, an email to an instructor. Am I to put myself in this paper, or am I to just paraphrase the textbook? It can be an easy preventative measure. So let's move on to scenario 3.
Oh, can I just jump in there for a minute, Kristen?
Please do.
I wanted to just take us back to the one comment in the Mentee to read other students' assignments and instructors' comments. And yeah, like Kristen was saying, that's actually probably going to present a problem for academic integrity. You can ask a fellow classmate, you know, how they think the assignment should be approached. Like, how do they understand the instructions? But even better than that would be to go right to the instructor. So be careful with that, because you could accidentally pick up their ideas, and then both of you could end up in trouble for plagiarism. And you might think, yes, oh, that was unintentional, that was accidental, but it's not going to seem that way. It's going to seem that the two of you colluded, or one of you gave the answers to the other, or something like that. So be really careful with that. And Terrence said in the chat that students get a critique of their writing from the instructor, but the instructor is not the audience typically, as Kristen pointed out. So yeah, a great question for them is, who is the audience for this assignment? It is nice when you get these ones like Terrence pointed out. The president of Fun Co. It's a report. That's a great example, Terrence. Yeah, so something to clarify sometimes.
Yeah, who you're writing to. One of the assignments I used to do is ask students to write a letter, which kind of at least narrows that sense of audience, right? You actually pick an individual that you're writing to. Yeah, I love those assignments. Okay, so we'll get to our last scenario then, which is entitled Follow the Trail of Breadcrumbs. And I'm going to do what I've done previous, which is to just post it in the chat for anyone who wants to follow along. This is our business example, so maybe we'll have some good controversy if there's business students. Okay, Hannah is writing a case study for her Introduction to Business course. In order to do this, she must research a specific shareholder deal and then evaluate whether it was beneficial for the company or the shareholders and what could have been done differently. In order to do this, she uses the web to search for information on the company's website about the deal and their mission statement, etc. In researching the company, she comes across articles that were written in business magazines about the deal that contains shareholder viewpoints, confirming that the deal was not in their best interests. She also comes across a blog written by an academic about the deal who argues the company was correct in making the deal because in the long run, it secured a specific market for the company. Then, in Googling further, she comes across a student paper about the same case study that uses a TED Talk by the former CEO where he, quote, I should have spills the beans, about the whole deal. She uses the TED Talk, the blog, the shareholder views, along with the course readings in writing the paper. Is this an academic integrity issue? All right, our last mentee. So here what we have are 3 statements, and you can use little sliders to demonstrate your level of agreement with the statements. Right, so the last question, the last prompt here is this an academic integrity issue?
Very interesting.
It is interesting, isn't it? It's really not too scientific. It's just engaging. We need to ask a lot more people. Interesting. I thought they would be more divisive. We're kind of hitting middle ground on a lot of these. There's a lot in the case study to cover. There's a lot that she's doing. Oh, interesting. So people disagree. As soon as they started taking sources, it was misconduct. Interesting. All right. I think the soon. Terrence has a question. We'll have to get to that in our responses. Yes, it is a loop. That's kind of part of what we ended up getting into in our own discussion about the case. These cases are not designed to be clear-cut. So if anyone is frustrated with no clear-cut answer, such as I'm a philosopher. I have to have debate. Okay, let's start then. Welcome to life. I am going to pass the baton first to Elaine.
Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, this is definitely a challenging scenario. From my perspective, Hannah has mostly done what was asked of her in the assignment instructions. She researched the company and the specific shareholder deal. She has found information sources to base her assignment on. However, in addition to using the web to find information on the specific deal, she could have used library resources to find additional information on which to base her evaluation. Hannah, the other issue is that Hannah really needed to evaluate the information sources that she has discovered before using any of them. It's always a good idea to ask yourself questions when you're looking at a website or you're looking at a source to determine whether or not it's a source that you should actually be using. So, for example, this could include questions like, who's the author or the creator of the site? Are they an authority in the field that you're researching? What's the purpose of the site? Who is the audience of the site? There's a whole other set of questions as well, but those are some of the preliminary ones. Evaluating information sources is really an art. And so Hannah could have also reached out to the library to talk to a librarian to help her craft search strategies that would find relevant resources from reputable sources. The biggest issue here is that she's used the TED Talk, which she found in a student paper. And that is, just as Sarah Jean was talking about before, that creates a challenge, an ethical challenge for her. The TED Talk, she could have discovered the TED Talk in some other way, and then that wouldn't have been an issue. It's not an issue with the TED Talk itself. It's an issue of where she found the TED Talk. And that's where the challenge arises. Just as we've said with other scenarios, the other broader issue is that there's a need to clarify the assignment instructions. Is the web the best place to find relevant information on this topic? Some information would be available via websites, but to evaluate whether a specific deal was in the best interest of the company, a search of business publications through the library may have been beneficial or helpful in this scenario. So, Sarah Jean.
Yeah, I believe that many of these sources are likely reliable and definitely useful for Hannah's assignment. Articles from trusted business magazines like the Harvard Business Review seem to be common sources for the field of business from what I've seen. The academic's blog may potentially be reliable if it's evidence-based more than opinion-based. So that would come to what Elaine was saying about evaluating the source. In both cases, like with Sal, Hannah will want to analyze the evidence to determine and support her view of whether the deal was more beneficial for the company or for the shareholders. So I agree that the use of the TED Talk gets into a gray area because of how Hannah came across it. Often I would actually suggest to students that checking out sources used by other sources can be a useful way to further your research. This is the case with sources that are already proven reliable. In this case, the use of the essay sharing site is suspect. To avoid that, Hannah should have used the library website or even Google Scholar instead of Google. It's possible that she's on the right track with her search methods, but has more to learn. Although Google might seem practical for the convenience, it risks using unreliable sources or sources that can contribute to actions of questionable academic integrity. You could use it for background reading during early planning phases only, if at all. And you may want to limit your search to the news or books filter tabs of a search engine. That might increase the reliability of the sources and the possibility that you could actually use them in your paper. Hannah could have come across the TED Talk by using the videos filter tab instead of going through an essay sharing site. So I am concerned that because Hannah found something useful through the essay sharing site, that she might be tempted to use it for her next paper too. Even though she didn't use actual material from the other student's essay, she's walking a thin line. And next time she could be tempted to borrow an idea rather than just a source from the other student's essay. I do also kind of doubt that Hannah would have stumbled upon the TED Talk within the other student's essay without actually reading their essay, which may have unduly influenced her own argument and essay. So if Hannah becomes reliant on this method instead of learning the acceptable academic methods of searching, she could end up with a serious academic misconduct charge down the line. I would advise Hannah to visit the right site and work with a coach to boost her confidence in developing her own ideas and expressing her writerly voice. I also want to just note that it's not an acceptable alternative to use and then cite the other student's essay. I think this might be what Terrence was getting at earlier. Don't cite a paper from an essay sharing site. Don't use them at all. It would look very shoddy, unfortunately, and the instructor would not likely be happy with the work to see that in there. So staying away from those sites is the best and really only fully acceptable approach.
Yeah, and basically citing another student paper is an admission of misconduct, essentially. It's a form of improper collaboration. So something that came up for me just in listening to these responses is when I was writing, I forgot that when I was writing this passage, I specifically wanted to give a number of sources that I thought could be questionable. So for example, information on the company website, you can imagine that that could be biased, trying to make the company look good. And then I also included shareholder viewpoints because you could imagine that being a self-selecting group where like the angry people get their voice heard or something like that, or the people that made a ton of money or whatever. So there could be bias there. And then I sort of put the academic blog in the middle. And then the last one about the CEO, it's sort of like, well, there's also whoever the CEO is would be concerned about their reputation and prestige and their, work at, I mean, they could be biased as well. And it's like single person, right? So there is nothing wrong with a TED Talk as a medium, but we have to think about what kind of expert is giving the TED Talk. Are they in their area of expertise? This is my worry about appeals to improper authorities. So, yeah, so what I kind of wanted to talk about with this case study is that, you know, where, of course, we're going to be able to find sort of like preliminary research by just Googling and looking at the company website, but really going to those more scholarly library research areas is just better. And again, asking ourselves, what is the point of the assignment? What does the instructor want me to demonstrate? Do they want you to demonstrate the best Googling? Or do they want you to demonstrate that you can take sources from a student, paper online? No, definitely not, right? No, they want to see how you do research, but also how you decipher amongst the sources that come up in your researching. So where do you pick information? How credible is it? That's demonstrating your research skill through the assignment. So again, you're better demonstrating your ability, the better research you actually use. It's not just use the library because that's what scholars have always done. No, it has a specific learning outcome tied to it. And the other issue is in terms of the sharing site, instructors see hundreds of assignments of the same assignments over the years, and you could really be working within a pattern if you look at those and sort of give away this improper work. So I would stay away from anything there, firstly, because you want to do your own work with integrity, but second, because it really won't help you. The other thing is the person who has put it up online, which they should not do, it's against the code, revealing that you've worked off of their work would actually make them subject to a charge of misconduct, and they could end up having their pass credit revoked. That's their problem. They put it online and shouldn't have. But I just want everyone to know that there is a charge for sharing and also for using past assignments. So those are both covered in the policy. So you don't want to be on either end of that. You really don't. You don't want someone to plagiarize off your work, right? Yeah, so on that note, we can take some questions. Oh, we have a question. What if the TED Talk was on a topic studied and researched by a leading scientist? Yes. So that's the whole point of it being about who's the expert. Are they an expert in that field? Are they credible in that field? Right? Because they could be a major outlier. Are they speaking to their area and so on? So it really depends on the substance. And the substance is about looking at the other areas of research that they're building on. Right. There's a really nice question here too that we could go into. Terrence has said, what if you speak with another student who's taking the course at the same time and they mention the TED Talk? I can answer this, or some of my colleagues can answer this. I have thoughts, but
go for it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, from an instructor perspective, if all of your students are using or if many of your students are using the same sources, that can be a red flag for collusion, or what is called sometimes improper collaboration. However, if you both use the source, and you cite it properly, and you synthesize it in your own demonstration of learning differently, right? So it's one thing to both cite the same TED Talk. It's another thing to say the same thing about the TED Talk. So, I think there's gradations there, but, you'd want to do your own work as much as possible. We have a hand up.
Yeah, and before we go to Viviana, there was another question. Andrea said, what is an essay sharing site? Terrence replied that the fact that Andrea, doesn't, I don't know how to say her name, but my sister-in-law is Andrea. So the fact that Andrea does not know is a good thing. However, I think we still have an obligation to answer this question. I mean, I can do it, but I think, Kristen, you probably can give the best overview.
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts about this, but essentially in the 21st century, there has been a proliferation of websites that parade as student help or essay help, but are actually platforms for cheating and assignment sharing. And many of these sites and businesses are illegal in other parts of the world. Um, and, you know, it's, I hope, just a matter of time until they're illegal here. But essentially, yeah, that's what those websites are. And I would suggest staying away from them as much as humanly possible, if only because those websites, first of all, take assignments from people and catalog them and keep them forever. And so your work could be shown to be plagiarized all over the world in different areas, and that could come back to haunt. That does come back to haunt people. The other thing is, these websites have been known to extort money from students to take their stuff down, to say, hey, I put this up there, I want it back, and they extort. Same thing with contract cheating websites. Say you buy an essay from them, and then they say, I'm going to tell your professor unless you give me another $500. These websites, if you use an unethical service, you get unethical service. They are not there for your education, I promise. So that's what I have to say about those websites.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Kristen. Yeah, that's really great points. Okay, Viviana, you can turn on your mic and your camera if you wish now.
Great, thank you. I'll leave my camera off for now. This has been really, really interesting. Thank you so much. I have a question with respect to credibility, because that's been brought up and mentioned a few times already. And then, experts as well. So how can a student determine the credibility of an expert?
That's a really, really good question. And it's not necessarily a really simple thing to do. But one of the things that I've done earlier on in the chat, I posted a link to our library guide on internet searching, and specifically to the tab about evaluating web information, which lists some of those questions that you might think about, especially around determining authority. So things like, whether the author, what are their credentials? You can Google an author and figure out what institution they're associated with. You can go into, the library's Discover tool and do a search for that author and determine what they've actually written on a particular topic. To figure out what their degrees are, what are their credentials, and that can help you to determine whether or not somebody is actually an authority in their subject area. The other thing that you can do is investigate to see who has actually cited that author. But you can't you can't do a search for an author and say, oh, well, these 25 people have cited that author. You need to actually do a little bit further, a little bit more investigation to determine whether or not, yes, he or she may have been cited, but perhaps they're being cited because there's been sorry, I'm having a hard time talking. They've been roundly criticized for the work that they're doing, or the work that they've done. So I'm thinking about the article that was published in The Lancet, which is a well-known scholarly journal in the medical field, about the link between the MMR vaccine and autism. Yes, that author has been cited tons of times, but only to debunk that link, because it was shoddy science. And so you can't just say, oh, because somebody's been cited a whole bunch of times, that makes them an authority. It might actually mean that they're exactly not an authority. And so, so that's something to be thinking about. What I will do also, we have a writing a lit review guide that talks about critical reading and some of that that evaluation of the source. So I'll find the link to that and I'll put that in the chat as well. And maybe Kristen and Sarah Jean have other comments to make there.
Yeah, we can make sure that that evaluating link and the lit review link are in the handout before I send it out. So thanks, Elaine. And I know we are going to want to wrap up here. So I put in the chat also a link to book an appointment with me if you have more questions about academic integrity. I can be kind of a starting place, and I'll let you know if, you should contact the library for more, or if I really get stuck, I could chat with Kristen to see what she would say. But that might be a good place to start if you have more questions.
And if I can just drill anything home, get that ounce of prevention, and if you can, approach your instructor ahead of time if you have questions, and then also use your university resources. Yeah, so the people are here. And okay, well, we will wrap up. Thank you everyone for your engagement and comments. Good luck on your learning journey. We know that September can be stressful, so yeah. Have a great
thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
And always reach out if you've got questions. If you're not sure, talk to your instructor, talk to the library, talk to the right site, talk to some other area in the institution. But always ask, because it's better to ask in advance than go down the wrong path. So.
Yeah. Okay. Good luck, everyone.
Take care, everyone. And thanks very much for coming and for all of your questions.